Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Black Jewelries and join us for more powerful.
Marcus Bennett stood at the window of a hotel room in Brussels at 2:14 in the morning, and the only light came from his phone. On the screen, his daughter Jasmine was holding up a certificate for a robotics competition, grinning with a gap where her front tooth used to be. The timestamp said the photo was 4 hours old. He had missed it live, the way he had missed the last 6. He set the phone face down on the desk and picked it right back up again 30 seconds later, because that was the kind of man he was now, a man who could not leave a silence alone. On the nightstand sat a recipe card, corners soft from 20 years of handling, his mother's cursive still dark enough to read. Thick-cut brioche, real butter, never margarine, cinnamon, vanilla, a pinch of nutmeg. At the bottom, in the same careful hand, feed people like they matter. Odessa Bennett had died on a Tuesday morning, in January 7 years ago, collapsed behind the counter of a soup kitchen on Detroit's east side after weeks of chest pains she never mentioned to anyone. She was 63. Marcus had built the Second Sunrise Diner 11 months later on the exact spot where she used to work the breakfast shift for free, and he had made himself one promise standing in the empty building before the paint dried. Nobody who worked there would ever feel like they were disposable, not on his watch. That promise was easier to keep when he was standing behind the grill himself. It got harder somewhere around the 3rd year, when a local news segment about his hiring program, people straight off parole, single mothers nobody else would call back, turned into a magazine feature, and the magazine feature turned into an invitation to speak in Chicago, and Chicago turned into 14 cities in 11 months. He told himself the traveling was the mission scaling up. He told himself Deborah Whitfield had it handled. Deborah had walked through the Second Sunrise back door 9 years earlier, carrying her life in a duffel bag and a laundry basket, 6 weeks removed from a stretch in county lockup for check fraud, unable to get so much as a callback from a temp agency. Marcus started her on dish duty at $9 an hour. She came in early. She stayed late without being asked. Within 18 months, she was running the morning shift, and 3 years after that, she had the keys to the office, the payroll system, and Marcus's full, unexamined trust. When he called from Denver or Dallas or Amsterdam, her answer was always the same 4 words, typed back inside of a minute. All good here, boss. So why at 2:14 in the morning in a city 6,000 miles from home did those 4 words suddenly feel like a locked door? It had started 3 weeks earlier with a text from a number he didn't recognize. 2 words, check Renee. He assumed it was spam and deleted it. 9 days later, a second one arrived from a different blocked number. Ask about the schedule. He was in a green room in Portland when it came through, waiting to walk on stage and talk about second chances to 400 people who had paid $60 a ticket to hear him do it. He read the text twice, then put his phone away and gave the speech anyway, and somewhere around the part where he talked about dignity being a business strategy, his stomach turned over on him for no reason he could name at the time. Here's the part nobody tells you about running from something. You can outpace it for a while. You cannot outpace it forever. The morning after Brussels, Marcus opened the labor report his accountant, a meticulous man named Walter Ford, had been sending him every month for 2 years without much scrutiny. Turnover at Second Sunrise had sat at 13% for its first 6 years, which Walter's notes described as healthy for the industry. In the last 7 months, it had climbed to 44%, nearly half the staff gone inside of half a year. Deborah's written explanation, tucked into the same report, blamed the usual things: personal reasons, people moving, better offers elsewhere. Marcus had signed off on that explanation for 3 straight quarters, without opening a single exit interview. He opened one now, then 6 more. Every single one described the same thing in different words. Scheduling that made no sense. Hours that didn't match the paycheck. A manager who knew things about your life that you never told her and brought them up exactly when you were most afraid. Funny. At 6:52 that same morning, a third text arrived, no name attached, just a photograph. Funny. It showed a handwritten schedule board, the physical one from the kitchen wall, not the clean digital version Deborah emailed him every Sunday. Funny. Marcus zoomed in on one line. Renee Carter, Monday through Saturday, open to close. 6 days running, 61 hours penciled in by hand. Funny. The digital version he'd been sent for that same week listed Renee Carter at exactly 40. Funny. He booked a flight home for that afternoon. He did not call Deborah. He did not call his daughter. Funny. He checked into a Days Inn 9 minutes from the diner under a name that wasn't his, and he spread every payroll sheet Walter had ever sent him across a bedspread that smelled like bleach, and he stayed up until 3:40 in the morning doing arithmetic that made his hands go cold. Funny. Average weekly payroll 6 months back, $8,190. Current average, $9,731. Funny. An extra $1,541 leaving the register every single week, and not one extra customer walking through the door to explain it. Funny. At 11:49 that night, one more text landed. This one had words instead of a photo. Funny. She told me she'd call ICE on my sister if I ever talked to you. Funny. I believed her. I still believe her. Someone has to stop this before it gets worse. Funny. Marcus stared at that message until the letters blurred, and when he finally set the phone down, he understood two things with total clarity. Funny. Somebody inside his own building was terrified enough to risk everything by reaching out to him in the dark, and he had been gone long enough that a stranger had more courage about his diner than he did. Funny. He barely slept. When he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's hands, flour to the wrist, and heard her voice from a hospital bed 7 years gone. Funny. Feed people like they matter, baby. Promise me. He had made that promise once already. Funny. Tomorrow morning, wearing a cap low over his eyes and a jacket with a coffee stain he'd never bothered to wash out, he was going to find out exactly how badly he'd broken it. Funny. Marcus walked into the Second Sunrise Diner at 6:57 the next morning and slid into the corner booth without a single person recognizing him. Funny. The bell over the door still made the same sound it always had. It used to mean home. Funny. Today it just meant he was a stranger in the one place on earth that carried his mother's name. Funny. The dining room was half full, a table of city plow drivers finishing overnight shift coffee, 2 nurses still in scrub tops, a couple splitting one plate to save money. Funny. He noticed the smell before he noticed anything else. Bacon, yes. Coffee, yes, but no cinnamon. Funny. His mother's French toast used to announce itself from the parking lot. This morning, there was nothing. Funny. A server approached his booth with an order pad gripped so tight her knuckles had gone pale. Funny. Renee Carter's file said 28. The circles under her eyes belonged on someone 20 years older. Funny. Her hello came out flat, professional, a voice with all the color drained out of it. Funny. He ordered coffee and wheat toast, and he watched her pour with a hand that shook just enough to slosh liquid over the rim, and he watched her wipe it up fast, the practiced motion of somebody who had cleaned up 1,000 small mistakes before anyone could notice. Funny. At 7:03, the office door opened, and Deborah Whitfield walked out in a navy blazer, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, a clipboard against her chest like a shield. Funny. Her eyes swept the room once, professionally, and slid right past Marcus. To her, he was nobody. Funny. Just another regular hiding behind sunglasses too dark for the hour. "Rennie," she called out, pleasant as poured syrup. Funny. Office now. The door didn't latch all the way behind them, and Marcus had built this room with his own 2 hands 11 years ago. Funny. He knew exactly which gap in the drywall carried sound. Deborah's voice drifted through it, calm, almost sweet, the tone of someone explaining something reasonable. Funny. "You're closing tonight at 11 and opening tomorrow at 4, she said, "and your daughter's school called again about lunch money." Funny. 3 weeks unpaid now, Renee. Maybe if you managed your time a little better, these things wouldn't keep happening. Funny. A pause, long enough for Marcus to picture exactly what was happening in that silence. Funny. "I'm docking today's check 2 hours for yesterday's tardiness. And if that school calls one more time, We're going to have a longer conversation about whether this job is a good fit for your situation. Funny. Renee's answer came back so quiet Marcus almost missed it. 2 words. Yes, ma'am. Funny. He had heard those 2 words 1,000 times in his life, and none of them had ever sounded like that. Funny. 2 words that meant something inside a person had already decided it wasn't safe to argue anymore. Funny. His coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth and stayed there. You do appreciate the chance you were given here, Deborah added on her way out, hand briefly on Renee's shoulder like a kindness. Funny. Not everybody gets a second one. Yes, ma'am. 15 minutes later, toast arrived, dry and pale, nothing like it should have tasted. Funny. The young cook who brought it out, Malik Johnson, mid-20s, forearms marked with old kitchen burns and one faded tattoo of his mother's initials, lingered a beat too long by the booth. Funny. You make the French toast here? Marcus asked, keeping his voice easy. Malik's face did something complicated. Funny. When we've got the ingredients for it. Manager switched suppliers about 6 months back, cheaper bread. Funny. Margarine instead of butter. He glanced once toward the office. Not my call, man. Funny. It's the one thing you ask a person to protect, Marcus thought, and somebody sells it off in pieces to shave a few dollars a week. Funny. Across the room, Deborah counted the tip jar at the register, wrote a figure in a small spiral notebook, then slid 2 20s into her blazer pocket, before writing a different, smaller figure into the shift log everyone else could see. Funny. A customer at table 4 left a $5 bill and walked out. Renee cleared the plate, went to pocket it out of habit, and Deborah materialized at her elbow like she'd been waiting. Funny. Tip pool, Renee. You know the rule. Renee handed it over without a word. Funny. Here is where the story could have ended, quietly, the way so many of them do, one exhausted woman deciding it wasn't worth the fight. Funny. It didn't end there, because at that exact moment, the front door chimed again, and everything that happened over the next 90 seconds would matter more than anyone in that diner could have guessed. Funny. A little girl in a pink jacket with a missing button pushed through the door, backpack half her size. Funny. Mommy, I forgot my lunch money. Renee's whole face changed, exhaustion cracking open into something closer to panic. Funny. She knelt fast, dug through her apron, and came up with exactly $6, all of it pressing it into her daughter's hands. Funny. Get lunch today and tomorrow, baby. Mommy will figure the rest out. The girl asked what her mother would eat. Funny. Renee lied and said she'd eat at the diner, then sent her off with 3 seconds of a hug before pulling away first, because staying any longer would have broken her completely in front of a room full of strangers. Funny. Deborah watched the whole exchange from 6 feet away, arms folded. This is a workplace, Renee. Funny. Not a daycare, and we both know your caseworker is still checking in on you. Funny. I'd hate to have to mention any of this. Yes, ma'am. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. Funny. A new number, no name, table 12. I know it's you. Meet me by the back hallway in 2 minutes. Funny. The woman at table 12 was in her early 30s, dark hair pulled into a bun, wearing a second sunrise apron of her own. Funny. Elena Vasquez had worked the counter for 14 months, quiet, reliable, the kind of employee whose name managers forget to mention when they list who deserves credit. Funny. She led him past the kitchen to a narrow hallway that smelled like bleach and old grease. Funny. I've seen your picture in the office, she said, before he could deny anything. You've been sitting in that booth for 45 minutes watching everything happen and doing nothing. And I understand why, but I can't keep doing this alone. Funny. Those texts were you, she nodded wet. My sister Sophia lives with me. Funny. She's undocumented. 6 months ago Deborah found out, and she pulled up the ICE tip line right there on her phone and smiled while she showed it to me. Funny. Said one call, and Sophia's gone in 48 hours. She pulled out her own phone and showed him a screenshot, a spreadsheet of employee names and phone numbers with a column labeled referral fee, $50 beside each one. Funny. She sells our information to payday loan companies. I get calls from places I never contacted. Funny. How many hours did you actually work last week? 52. Paid for 40. Funny. Renee worked 68 and got the same 40 on her check. Malik's parole officer got a call from Deborah last month, just to remind him she could. Funny. It's everybody, Mr. Bennett. She knows exactly what each of us is afraid to lose, and she uses it like currency. Funny. Marcus asked why nobody had told him sooner. Elena's answer landed like a stone. Funny. 2 people tried 6 months ago. One got fired within the week for stealing. The other had their hours cut to nothing. Funny. Both quit inside of 10 days. Nobody else was going to risk it after that. Funny. Until I decided I didn't care anymore what happened to me. She pressed a copied desk key into his palm. Funny. Bottom drawer of her office. 2 sets of time cards. A notebook with everything written down in her own hand. Funny. Tonight, after close, I'll let you in through the back. 18 hours, Marcus thought, sitting in his car outside afterward, with his hands still on the wheel and his mother's recipe card on the dashboard where he could see it. Funny. 18 hours until he knew exactly how deep it went. He came back at 11:43 that night. Funny. Elena was waiting by the propped open service door, a brick holding it against the frame. Funny. The kitchen sat dark except for the red glow of the exit signs, and the whole place smelled like it always had, grease and old coffee, except now it felt like walking into evidence rather than a home. Funny. The copied key turned easily in the office lock. The bottom drawer held 2 stacks of time cards, one labeled payroll, one labeled actual. Funny. Renee Carter, payroll hours 40, actual hours 68, 28 hours simply erased. Elena Vasquez, 40 against 54. Funny. Malik Johnson, 40 against 52. Card after card told the identical story, week after week, a difference of 20 to 30 hours per person, quietly vanishing into somebody else's pocket. Funny. Beneath the time cards sat a black composition notebook, and inside it Deborah had documented her own crimes in careful, looping handwriting, as if she were keeping a ledger for a business she was proud of. Funny. Week of March the 3rd. Renee Carter, 68 hours worked, 40 paid, profit $420, leverage, outstanding parking warrant, caseworker, monitoring custody. Funny. Elena Vasquez, 54 worked, 40 paid, profit $294, leverage, sister undocumented. Funny. Malik Johnson, 52 worked, 40 paid, profit $240, leverage, parole officer. Funny. 18 months of entries, 14 employees. Funny. An average theft of roughly $300 a week, which, by Marcus's shaking arithmetic, came to something north of $280,000. And that number didn't even touch the stolen tips, the kickbacks from the cheaper suppliers, or the $50 referral fees sold off to loan companies that Elena's screenshot had already shown him. Funny. This wasn't carelessness. This was a system built patiently brick by brick on the exact fears his hiring program had promised to protect people from. Funny. At the very bottom of the drawer, in a folder labeled simply CYA, Marcus found a draft complaint accusing him personally of workplace misconduct, dated 2 weeks earlier, with Renee's signature forged at the bottom. Funny. Insurance in case he ever found out. His hands went cold in a different way now. Funny. This wasn't only theft, it was a plan to destroy him the moment he became a threat. Funny. He photographed every page, every card, every entry, every forged signature, the vendor emails on Deborah's unlocked computer, showing the switch to margarine and cheap bread that had killed his mother's recipe for an extra $340 a month. Funny. Then he put everything back exactly where he'd found it, locked the drawer, and walked out into the alley at 12:14 in the morning, with his phone full of a story he wished, with his whole chest, wasn't true. Funny. What happens now? Elena asked quietly in the dark. Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, front door, no disguise, Marcus said. Funny. I'm calling everyone together, and she's going to answer for every single dollar. Marcus Bennett walked into his own diner at the next morning wearing a suit instead of a hoodie for the first time in years, no sunglasses, no cap, nothing hidden. Funny. The bell chimed the way it always did. Conversation in the dining room simply stopped. Funny. Renee, mid-pour at table 3, let the coffee pot slip from her fingers and shatter against the tile, and Marcus told her softly to leave it, that it was going to be all right, though he understood as he said it that all right was going to take considerably more than kind words. Funny. Everyone please, he said, loud enough to carry. Front of house now. Deborah emerged from the office already smiling, clipboard against her chest, the picture of professional composure. Funny. Mr. Bennett, What a wonderful surprise. I didn't know you were back in town. Something in his face made the smile falter halfway through the sentence. Funny. He didn't waste time. He called Renee forward first, told her gently she wasn't in trouble, asked her in front of the room how many hours she'd worked the previous week. Funny. 68, she whispered. How many had she been paid for? 40. He asked Malik the same question and got 52 against 40. Funny. He asked Elena and got 54 against 40. Then he turned to Deborah and held up his phone. Funny. 2 sets of time cards, in your handwriting, in your own desk. Want to explain the difference? Funny. There's been a misunderstanding, Mr. Bennett, I can absolutely. Is that what we're calling $280,000? He said, voice level. A misunderstanding? Funny. He read one line from the notebook aloud, word for word, Renee's name, her stolen hours. The caseworker listed as leverage beside the profit figure, and the room went so silent that Marcus could hear the refrigerator compressor humming in the back. Funny. Renee made a small sound like something inside her had finally been allowed to break, and Elena caught her by the shoulders before her knees gave out. Funny. Deborah's mask didn't crack so much as it simply dropped. You went through my desk, she said. Funny. You had no right a desk, Marcus answered. I own the building. Funny. And I have a draft complaint with a forged signature that says you were prepared to destroy me the moment I noticed. Funny. He gave her one choice. Walk out in the next 5 minutes, or he'd call the police and she could walk out in handcuffs instead. Funny. She didn't apologize. She never did, not in that moment, and not once in the 18 months that followed, through an arraignment on wage theft and identity theft charges and a civil suit that would eventually cost her almost everything she'd stolen and then some. Funny. Her last words on her way out the door were aimed at the whole room, not just at Marcus. Funny. You people don't know what it takes to keep a place like this running. I kept this diner alive while he was off giving speeches. Funny. You'll see how grateful you are when it falls apart without me. Nobody in that room believed her, and the following year would prove them right in numbers nobody could argue with. Funny. A woman at table 6 stood up before the door had even finished swinging shut. Funny. I'm an employment attorney, she said to Renee, sliding a business card across the counter. Funny. I heard every word of that. If you want to file, I'll represent you at no charge. Funny. It was the kind of small, unplanned decency that never makes the evening news but changes the entire shape of a person's year, and Renee held that card in both hands like it was something that could shatter. Funny. 3 hours later, Marcus sat with Renee, Elena, and Malik in the office that used to belong to someone who no longer worked there, a legal pad in front of him, and a promise he intended to keep this time without excuses. Funny. He slid 3 envelopes across the desk. Renee's held a check for $6,180, every stolen hour repaid with 15% interest. Funny. She read the number twice before her hands started shaking for an entirely different reason than they had all week. Funny. Elena's held $4,910. Malik's held $3,840. Funny. 14 employees in total would receive checks that week, totaling $96,400, funded from Marcus's own savings, while a forensic accountant chased down the rest. Funny. Money doesn't undo what happened, he told them, but it's where we start. Then he told them what came next, and it was bigger than money. Funny. He was converting Second Sunrise into a worker-owned cooperative, keeping 51% for himself and splitting the remaining 49% among employees by tenure and hours worked, with 40% of quarterly profits distributed directly to employee owners. Funny. He was creating a 5-person elected employee council with real veto power over hiring, firing, scheduling policy, and vendor contracts, meaning he could no longer fire a single person without their approval, and they could overrule him with a simple majority. Funny. Every time card would move to a transparent digital system, nobody could quietly falsify. Funny. And he was writing a new rule into the employee handbook that he made them help him word themselves, using an employee's immigration status, criminal record, custody situation, or any other private vulnerability as leverage would mean immediate termination, no exceptions, no warnings. Funny. What if we make bad calls with that kind of power? Malik asked. Then we'll be wrong together and fix it together, Marcus said. Funny. That's still better than being right alone in an empty room. Last on the pad was the recipe card, which he set on the desk between them. Funny. Thick-cut brioche, real butter, cinnamon, vanilla, a pinch of nutmeg. We're going back to this, he said, voice thick. Funny. Costs more, we're raising the price by 50 cents, and I don't want to hear an argument about it. Funny. Renee reached out and touched the corner of the card the way you'd touch something fragile that had survived a fall it shouldn't have. Funny. 1 year later, on an ordinary Tuesday, Marcus stood at the grill beside Malik, now the diner's executive chef and a part owner in his own right, training a new hire on the exact ratio of egg to cream that made the toast taste like something worth waking up early for. Funny. Renee, promoted to assistant general manager and chair of the employee council, was walking Elena, now floor manager, through the quarter's profit-sharing numbers. Funny. $1,800 a person this quarter, split evenly among 14 owners, and Elena mentioned quietly that her sister Sophia, hired on now 3 days a week, fully documented after the council pooled resources for a lawyer, had finally saved enough for her citizenship filing fee. Funny. In the corner booth, the same booth where Marcus had once sat in disguise, drinking cold coffee and doing math that broke his heart, sat Renee's 2 daughters, faces dusted in powdered sugar, insisting their French toast tasted like their grandmothers used to. Funny. Turnover at Second Sunrise now sat at 4%. Revenue was up 43%. Funny. A reporter from the Detroit Free Press, taking notes at the counter, asked Marcus if he had any regrets. Funny. Just one, he said, that it took a stranger's courage to teach me what my own mother already told me for free. Funny. Feed people like they matter. He had broken that promise once quietly from 6,000 miles away without ever meaning to. Funny. He did not intend to break it again. Renee stayed silent for 18 months. Elena carried her fear alone for 14. Funny. Malik swallowed his questions for 2 full years because every single one of them believed, the way so many people believe, that speaking up would cost them more than staying quiet ever did. Funny. Somebody finally paid attention. That is the whole lesson, and it did not require a hero, only a person willing to look up from his own life, long enough to notice someone else's. Funny. If you have ever felt invisible at the place where you work, if you have ever swallowed the words, "Yes, ma'am," when every part of you wanted to say something else, tell us in the comments. Funny. There are more people reading this than you think who have stood exactly where you are standing right now. Funny. And if this story moved you even a little, send it to somebody who needs to hear tonight that being seen is still possible. Funny. Change does not begin with the person causing harm deciding to stop. It begins with the person watching deciding they will no longer look away. Funny. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. Funny. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Funny. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. Funny. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.